Great. Hi there. So, welcome to the Soul Led Revolution with me, your host, Yolandi Bosov. And today I am so excited to speak to Elen Elenna. And she is the author of The Silver Wheel, The Lost Teachings of the Deerskin Book. She's a shamanic and Elven ascension guide, bringing the Elven and star teachings of the new dawn. So, through years of initiation by the earth and the stars, she has come to walk a path of remembrance, sharing the wisdom of the Elven ones and the star elders. Also, Ellen, I'm so excited to speak to you, and just thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you for asking me. It's a really beautiful space to come into. I can feel the energy you hold here. Really magical.
So, oh man, so tell us a bit about you. I want to know your story. We were speaking before we started the call. Just like I want to know more about like the connection with the Elven lineage, all that type of stuff, and just tell us a bit about like how you got onto this, where you're from, how this all happened for you.
Yeah. Well, the elven, I guess good to start with the sense of the elven and who they are. And I can go backwards then into my story because I mean, the only way I'd met the elven in my earlier life was in a fictional fantasy, part of the myth and the dream of our imagination really. But it's really the elven, if you think of Lord of the Rings, of the forest, Galadriel and so forth, Arwen, the people, the shining ones who came from the stars and parallel ascended galaxies of light long, long ago, in first time in the Elder Light. They really received the source and celestial instruction codes of Earth in the beginning, dreaming with source, with the heart of creation, this song of Earth, of all that Earth could become. And they hold this dream of Earth very much from the time of beginnings and a deep, deep love of coming here. So it's a very guardian energy, very, very deeply magical. And very cosmical as well as of Earth. That's what I love about the elven energy. It's so of beyond these parallel ascended galaxies of light, of the stars. The elven are star walkers. They've walked many, many star dimensions in this galaxy, others, universes of light, really learning and remembering the way of the star creator, of how we keep creating through love that source dream in any dimension, any realm that we show up within. And but none of this I remembered on my journey beginning, but just to contextualize them, because it was like a treasure hunt, and a very, very gradual process over years. So it probably began 20 years ago. I'm 40 now, so this
Yeah.
was in my when I was about 19, 20. It really began. And before that, I'd had very mystical experiences as a child, but I didn't remember that after a certain point. That only came in later after a lot of healing. I remembered these very, very early years of this sense of ancientness, of sorrow, of joy in my heart. And I was born in London, in southeast London, and my view out of my bedroom window was of the city lights and at night the stars above. But it was as though the lights of the city merged with the stars above, and this sense of this rapture and a mystical song. And I was aware of God, of Jesus. I was brought up in an atheist household, but I think I'd come across some evangelical presence through someone who'd looked after me. So I was aware of them, and I had such a sense of the presence of the divine and this figure of Jesus. And Jesus I could only describe as feeling. I thought, he must be my brother. I feel so close to him. I can't understand that he is, so other or out there. He feels related. He feels like I feel like his sister. But all of this I forgot. Sent to boarding schools then, very young, age 7, and I just closed off my heart to survive those experiences and
Yeah.
switched off my emotions. What I mostly wanted to switch off, what I couldn't bear, was the grief and the pain of being in this environment, which was incredibly regimented, dawn
Yes.
to dusk, little iron bedsteads, horrible food, just, suddenly part of, a group of little girls, and you're just regimented, trooped from one thing to another. All of the dream space of life vanished, the warmth, the magic of home. And I couldn't bear the grief. I couldn't bear the pain of it. I'd see us all crying at night in our beds, these little girls sobbing, the duvets over them. And I thought, we're all crying and nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
So I found a way to switch off my emotions. But that moment fascinates me because with switching off my emotions and my grief, what hurt, I also switched off the connection to the divine.
Yeah.
I had no sense from that point of the presence of that mystical rapture, that ancient soul. I'd used to sing outside my, out of my window at night, these songs, and to my little sister to sing her to sleep, like mystical songs just pouring through, that now maybe I can recognize was a sort of light language. I was singing a
Yes.
story of a soul. I didn't even know how I knew or felt those things. And it wasn't part, I was obviously a normal little girl. It wasn't part of my daily reality, but it would just kind of come out. And that all went and it all switched off. And I went on then very much a journey of the mind. And I studied Greek and ancient Greek and Latin all through school. I just wanted to go to Oxford and be an academic, fulfill my father's, my grandfather's dreams. They'd been to Oxford, been writers, publishers, very intellectual family. And I wanted more than anything to fulfill that and, live that dream. So also threads of imagination, of fantasy woven through, read Lord of the Rings, all of this, but it was never more than fantasy. It was never more than imagination to me at that point in those years. And then when I finally did, I went on a gap year after school and I had a couple of very strong experiences with the earth in Greece, in the Peloponnese, and in South America, in Peru. And it was the sense of the earth breaking through my consciousness, just as a great being, as a soul, as a presence, and saying, you're here to be with me. You're here. This is why, to be present with earth. And I'd been so in my own little bubble of pursuing my goals that was such a complete turnaround. It was a deep mystical awareness. But then I carried on, I didn't know really where to place that. And I carried on. But I arrived my first time at Oxford, so the fulfillment of all my dreams. I thought, this is all. I've arrived. The ivory towers. And I started having this recurrent sense of, while I was there, I had this imaginary scenario. If someone asked me why I'm here and why I'm doing this, why I love this, that I couldn't find the answer in my core. It was very elusive, and I would have this replay, and it felt like I was sort of spiraling outside myself, the reasons why I was there. Somehow it wasn't in the core of me, but it was a kind of inquiry, just hovering in awareness. That was the closest I had to a self-inquiry, but it was a sense of some kind of emptiness or vacuum, perhaps within me. I wasn't sure really what to do with it. And then one day, walking through the meadows with friends, and I was wearing a bright yellow dress I'd borrowed from a friend from some vintage store, and it was absolutely bright yellow, sort of 50s dress or something.
Yeah.
And there was an old lady sitting on the park bench, all dressed in green hat, and she called out to me. She said, "I love your dress." She said, she had this Eastern European accent. I can't do it. Her voice was so beautiful. And she called out. She said, "Come and sit with me. I have something to show you." And I sat down. She had all these drawings laid out on her knee, and she was drawing them. They were her sketches, and they were of the trees and of the birds. And she had these beautiful deep brown eyes, and they were just full of life. And she looked in my eyes and she said, "I'm drawing the trees and the birds." She said, "They're my friends. They speak to me." And in that moment, it was beyond her words, but it was in what she said and in her being. I felt she inhabited a reality that in those moments when the earth had spoken to me, I was being shown, but she was a human being inhabiting that mystical golden earth, a more whole reality of love, walking literally some other dimensional earth. And it was real. She was real. And I realized in that moment, sitting next to her, that I wasn't. It was like that awareness of emptiness, just sort of everything coalesced. And I realized I was like a magical tapestry I'd put together from my environment, of my father's, my grandfather's dreams. I'd kind of put them together, but that it compared to her, and in that moment of presence, I wasn't real, almost like a husk, like I didn't really exist. So I went back to my room in Oxford and then had this night of light, really. It was like I was irradiated, and I saw my grandfather's spirit sort of floating past the windows, and it was the sense of, I'm carrying your dream, and I give it back to you now. I need to walk a true reality and the reality of my heart. And I gave up my place almost overnight to the despair of everyone around me, and just saying, I sort of imitated Zoe, the lady I'd met on the bench. That was all I had to go by. So I'm going to be an artist. I'm going to walk my heart. But I began a journey then, and just to kind of, I guess, shortcut it a little bit, because of course there are so many moments. It became what was a very heartbreaking, very magical odyssey, but years that were very challenging, because I just had to follow little clues, and I was kind of breaking down at the same time because I didn't know how to walk a different reality, and all of the security of my family, of all that I'd been born into. I really had to leave that behind. Not that I wanted to, but the only way they knew how to hold me was to say, come back.
Yeah.
And I knew I couldn't come back into that structure. And I had to find something else. And as we spoke about before, it wasn't a sense of what you're doing is wrong or that reality is wrong. It's just I've been awoken to something deeper and more whole, and I have to follow that.
Yeah.
So I took myself over to Wales. That was where I was called eventually. And with a sense of I do need to do something. So I was at university there, but increasingly also trying to be in nature to follow this path of deep listening. And my consciousness, though all the while very anxious, very broken, very lots of voices in my head pulling me this way, that, trying to be in this pure state. Things like cutting off all my hair, just giving away all my clothes, and continuously trying to come back to this pure place of mysticism that I'd seen and in this human being, and not knowing my own path to that. And I think that's what I would say is where the Elven remembrance comes in, is what I learned bit by bit through my own journey was the earth needs us to remember who we are, to bring our soul, our essence to her. And then we can walk in her true lighted reality. Then we start walking this magical mystic earth. But she needs us to love ourselves enough, discover our own essence. She so wants us to come into being. And I think so much of our cultural training is not to honor those prompts of our heart, that it's kind of selfish or a distraction or not what we're here to do. And so again and again, I needed to go against that conditioning and follow little prompts in my heart. But I was really at a breaking point. I remember coiled on the bathroom floor in this little cottage in Wales, and I had for the second time cut off all my hair. I didn't mean to, I just was trying to find something pure to get back to the beginning. And I'd shorn everything off, the nail scissors lying on the side, just in agony within, so much agony. And my partner at the time, who had come over the hills into Wales with me, said, I think you do need to see someone. And I'd seen this advert for a psychotherapist because he was interested in psychotherapy, and I thought it was for him. But she was also, it said she was a dragon storyteller. So I thought, this is someone. Yeah, so links.
Love it.
I thought I could trust this, and I could go with this because she's someone, I don't know, heart, imagination is woven in there. It's not all scientific and clinical. And so I started seeing her, and gosh, it's such a long story. I try not to tell every single little part of it. We'll be here
It's
forever.
fine. I'm sitting here listening on the edge of my seat. Please continue.
Well, when I saw her, it was a second. I mean, I do fall in love very deeply with people when I see them. Yeah. Part of my elven essence and kind of lineage continuum is through Gwenwyvar, which is the Welsh name for Guinevere. And of course, if you know the ancient legends of Avalon, she has quite a romantic life, and it's been the same for me. The path of love, of romance, has been a big part of my awakening and remembering through those I've fallen in love with, my partners, my husbands, and the marriages that I've had. And it's also just falling very deeply in love when I see a human being in beauty. It's that sense. And I think that is part of, the starseed and the angelic legacy on earth, is we have this tendency to love, which can feel like our greatest vulnerability and weakness at times, as well as our greatest strength. And so learning to trust that, and learning that it is strength and not weakness, and trusting this love, which at times has felt so frightening. And when I saw this lady, this psychotherapist, she stood framed in her doorway. It was roses around her in her home in Wales where she held her sessions. And I just had never seen, again, a human being like it. She was full of fae and goddess energy, which I know now, but I'd never
Yes.
seen someone so elementally alive and sparkling through her whole being. And it made me feel like a piece of grey. I felt like, like I was like a grey cardboard cutout, and the sense of unworthiness was so deep, but also the sense of enchantment and, yeah, just to trust and follow it. So as I went into her room, I saw these leaflets for Priestess of Avalon training in Avalon. I thought I'd read things like the Mists of Avalon, again as myth, as
Yes.
imagination, but never as reality. I thought, that's interesting. And the phrase woo woo came up, which is what my family always referred to anything, like that's
Yeah.
pretty woo woo, harmless, maybe a bit odd, but very other, but totally curious as well. But part of my journey of healing with her was so interesting. The journey of allowing myself to feel the grief I'd suppressed for years. And I think I might have cried for 2 years straight, letting myself feel all the heart rending grief, pain that I had suppressed through the years of childhood and adolescence and the various experiences in our family that went on. And I'd got so good at sublimating and going outside of my feelings. And again and again, she challenged me through that to be present. How are you really right now?
Yes.
What's really going on? And I'm always just in awe of that. The portal of our heart, of how we truly feel, is the gateway to all of the beyond of this extraordinariness.
Yeah.
That to honor our feelings in them, their most basic form as they are, leads us to this deep. Oh, sorry, that's my dad's phone in this space, so it may ring for a moment.
That's fine.
Um, and yeah, so it leads to those extraordinary gateways of this far remembrance. I think there's such a calling in this time to. I wonder if he'll get it. No, he's got it now. Oh, I'll just go and take it off the hook actually, so it's not ringing to our call.
All good.
Yeah, so this this portal of the heart and the far remembrance, the more I honored how I felt, this correlative experience in that space of healing, this correlative experience was happening as I walked in nature, as I lived this life. And my relationship at that point ended. It was a very beautiful, supportive bridge, but I was ready to be on my own feet, and I was walking the hills, living in solitude. And the portals just started opening, the dimensions of what I would say, the fairy portals, especially first, the fae and the fairy and the goddess portals on the land. And I then stumbled across the ways of shamanism also. This happened around the same time. And I met that in the form, and that's been very precious to me. I feel I stand at this interface where kind of shamanism and ascension meet, and it really
Yes.
fascinates me how they dance together as a bridging
Love.
consciousness. Yeah, at this
Yes.
time. And I I'd always written books, and that was really my dream. But I was fascinated by literature and these very fine and subtle states of being. But when I met with shamanism, it was the sense of that which the one who stands with a foot in both worlds is able to travel safely back and forth, is as grounded here in this reality, able to stand in the physical plane of 3D, of whatever dimension we experience our physicality at, and also to be as far out as you can possibly imagine. And that model being simultaneously both, which we are multidimensionally designed to be. And I think the shaman as archetype within the soul stands for that potential in our humanity. And
Yes.
I met this shamanic artist who painted her visions of traveling to those realms through the drum, the way of the drum, which has been my path ever since, into the upper world, the lower world, which are the inner dimensions of Earth, these multidimensional spheres, and bringing through the lights of wisdom of our greater being, our guides, through into this world, their real energy imprints, though, through the art. And I was mesmerized. So I started going to see her around the same time and making these journeys. But the funny thing was, I was so terrified. I wouldn't journey at first myself. A shaman will often
Yes.
offer to journey for you. And I think often our greatest fears are where our greatest power is. And I was mortally frightened of journeying. I was like, there's no way. I didn't know what would happen to me. I thought I'd be swallowed up somewhere. But yeah, so And interesting, because when we spoke at the beginning, we spoke about the space that we're being called to at this time, which
Yeah.
is this place beyond the light and the dark. You said it as the grey almost, the place where we allow for it all to exist, and that is the place of peace. And it reminded me of my first spirit animal that came in, the fox, who, before talking to you this morning, was walking with me in the forest in her form as the white fox, the Arctic fox. And she was speaking. She was like, I'm going to come through this morning, through the call, because as that walker in those twilight worlds, the spaces between, that's where we access this vast magic. And as you
Yes.
say, that's the domains of peace. And the gateways that have opened for me through this path of healing of my heart. And I just want to emphasize that. I think it's so important that the messiness of our emotions, we can feel so imperfect that we're in pain or not at peace or not happy, or, and not to judge ourselves, that to feel these things, to let ourselves feel and let the movement of that, they're like the rivers, the currents of our emotions that carry us to this place of our truth, and these great doorways that open. And for me, these incredible doorways that have opened into this great timeline of Earth. And I began to come across that record, because I was in Wales, of the Shining Ones, of Rhiannon, Blodeuwedd, Ceridwen, Arian Rod, ancient elven queens, goddess beings, Shining Ones, who, it is said, disappeared into the hollow hills. And I had a stronger sense from that time, and as I'm seeing these kind of white archways rising, their sigils, of my own existence was as much beyond those archways in that great timeline of Earth that's beyond our historical era, beyond our embodied remembrance, that I as much dwelt there as I did here, if not more. That I was actually more there, and that my existence here in this lifetime is to do with reconnecting into that continuum. Yeah. And establishing what I would say that is the Earth. It's this great timeline of great eras of light that we've had, that many are remembering, Lemuria, Atlantis before, and beyond. What I would call our great starlight eras of peace, the diamond suns, the great processional cycles marked by the Pleiades and so forth, that have been before, these galactic and cosmical cycles of light. And the Elven have walked the Earth through all of these eras, and that higher dimensional Earth, which they sometimes call Oriel, also known as Tara by some, is returning in a new wave pulse of light. This blueprint of the new Earth, of a higher dimensional Earth. So it's not this ground of Earth that we've known in the 3D. And so many of us belong to that continuum. I can feel that through you, through the lineages you bring, the dragon priestesses, beyond the star seeds. We actually, in a sense, belong more to that Earth, but we've had to incarnate, and so many of us coming this time around, into this density in order to activate this sequencing of codes, awakenings, so that we can return what we know, activate the codes of this higher dimensional Earth into the present, form the bridges. But what's beautiful is we transmute the DNA. We were also speaking earlier of the DNA we carry through our blood, our ancestral blood. So I really honor my timeline in this lifetime. My ancestors here, through my mother, my father, my grandparents. I've been gifted this beautiful DNA continuum that goes right back, and through each one of us, even if you're not Elven, not dragon of the ancient timeline, not of one of the old lineages of Earth, just by being in a body, just by carrying her elemental being as we do, we have these elder codes within us. And they are activating, and as they do, through the spirals of our DNA, which for each one of us, through our ancestry, go right back to the Shining Ones, when the full human angelic blueprint was complete. And it's been deactivated through the last era. It's been at higher levels of benevolent intention, and also less benevolent through manipulation. It's been switched off and switched down. We've been really kind of like dialed down, so that the range of human experience is much, much like a way shorter bandwidth. Like given, and if you saw a harp, we've been playing like 3 strings or something, and then before we had the full range, all of the harp strings, the full music.
Harp strings, yeah, totally. I feel that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll take a breath there. That was the first roll.
And so, like all of this started coming through. And is this when the book also Is this when all of that
Yeah.
became clear to you as well
Yeah,
then?
yeah, thank you for grounding it back to the book and bringing it. So yeah, I that's what I was doing on the ground. So I'd gone to university. That was, and I'd gone. I was switching up subjects. So I'd started in ancient Greek, Latin, and then I switched to theology, then philosophy, then English, and I eventually, I think looking back, my soul was mastering a lot of different things and just
Yeah.
saying, I will do this for so long, this for so long. And finally, I began a creative writing PhD, and I've completed my degree in English literature, and I began writing. So, through the shamanic process, I'd always been writing, and my longing was to be able to write the actual reality of what I've just spoken, of the Shining
Yeah.
Ones, the remembrance, especially of the Elven, goddess Shining Ones who I was remembering, and their wisdom. And I was also trying to do it through the form of the university at this point, and it did carry me up to a certain point in the process. But I was becoming more and more shamanic in my methods of doing that. And I had this sense, this vision came to me through my shamanic practice of this ancient book of wisdom that I was being shown lying in a forest clearing, and it was clad in deerskin, white deerskin, so beautiful, the sense of something so precious. There was some buzzard feathers woven with threads onto its front. At times it would shapeshift, opening it up, and within, on pages of bark, like birch bark, was this script of gold, of silver, of sapphire, of violet inks, and it was this light language, the elven light language, inscribed on the pages. And I knew that it was my task to bring this through. It was like, this is the record. And it was this sense, when you're gifted it's your mission. It was like, I can't get around this. This is the one thing. I have to translate this into the language of this world. It's the wisdom that my soul knows. But it's not yet belonging to any language that's current in this world, and I have to translate it. And I knew that its wisdom had to come through its pure energy as well as the sense of it, the concepts,
Yes.
So I set forth on that journey, and that was the silver wheel, because the wisdom that it held as I saw it, it was odd. I say it was ancient, but it's a paradoxical light encoded package. It belonged also to the future.
Oh.
And as they began to teach me, they told me it had been created as a time capsule during the time of Lemuria, in a grove that the Elven Ones grew over aeons, like these white grooved trees that actually came from another world, from these Elven ascended galaxies. The leaves overhead like sunrise or sunset, amethyst crystals at the base of each of the trees brought from far galaxies. And they had, through aeons, the codes had travelled through the trees, built up in the leaf fall of the seasons, encoded into the crystals. And finally, in the last age of Lemuria, a deer came and laid herself at the centre of the clearing. And she gifted her body as part of the book. And the pages then whirling from the trees, a very magical creation, the Elven Ones singing throughout it as this light package encoded, created, of the deerskin book. And once it was created, the wisdom of the ages of peace of before, of who the earth truly is, the true nature of the earth, the stars, and who we are, all encoded, it was placed into the seventh dimension of another realm to be gifted now. And as I now know, my soul was one of those creating that book back then, reseated for now to be the one re-accessing it and bringing it in. But I didn't know that 3 years. I was just on the treasure hunt, being gifted a bit at a time. So it's actually Venus that it was stored in, which is where many of the Elven records for Earth are held in the interim. And what's beautiful is that they're held completely pristine. So they hold none of the era of forgetfulness and density we've been through. They come in pristine, just whole, re-gifted. So I spent my years then. Silver Wheel took me 10 years to write, because it was really, began to play the harp, I'm playing the drum, going in shamanic ceremony, just dissolving, losing the veils of density bit by bit, my own fears, my own self-hatred, my own self-doubt, just dissolving and dissolving. And as those veils dissolved, the light just coming back in more and more, recoding my own divine angelic blueprint DNA. And at each stage able to read more of the silver wheel, able to code it through, the language of the Elven coming through as I played the harp. And I would learn, and then listening to the crystals also, which were gifted from the land in Wales, some clear quartzes that I listened to over and over again, and began this journey, 10 years of learning to write. And at first what would happen, I'll just say this last little bit about it, but what would happen was I would try to write it, and then I would knew the words weren't expressing it, they were actually kind of covering it. It was like, you try to express this unbelievable reality and you put the words and they just don't match. and
Yeah.
and I had to, it was because the neural pathways and my use of language needed to recode. The information needed to move from my heart all through my body, through my brain, recode the neural pathways. And I had to let go of the way my brain, intellect, was holding information. And as that recoded, I was able to write in a way that was direct, that was a continuum with the light information, so that the silver wheel, as it stands now, you just hold it, and it is that light encoded light package. Even if you never read a word, you feel the energy. It's because the energy came through. And yeah.
Wow. I love that. And I think for me it is that, like, it's that construct, that language that is, I mean, even when I'm speaking light language, it's like you
Yeah.
cannot translate, like, through our minds right now what, like, this energy is that we actually have access to and that is available to us.
Yeah.
And it's so beautiful that you say that. I've never actually heard anyone speak about, like, that process of actually starting to change the
Yeah.
pathways. So
Yeah,
it's
it's so
incredible.
important. As you say, we can't immediately. It's like that, as you speak that light language, with your greater soul and being exactly what is being said. But if you try to put it into language, it would change it, this language. But if, yeah, you give it a little time, let the light wave, because the way we've been designed in the last aeon is the heart information comes through and then the head comes down on top of it and
Yeah.
interprets it. And we have to let the energy move differently, let it come in through the heart, and actually not let the brain come down. Remind the brain it's a receiver, not a
Yes.
determiner. It's like it's not meant to be the active agent all the time. But it's beautiful. It's a stunning, incredible. It creates these beautiful conceptual patterns. It's as beautiful as our heart. So let it recode, let it carry the frequency, but it takes a little time, and then it will play. Then it begins to
Yes.
play.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. And this is just like, this is so fascinating. So, like, if someone is, like, listening to you today, and obviously, I mean, I'm, like, full of, like, totally feeling this energy, but if someone wanted to discover more or learn more, or, like, just experience more of this energy and actually start working with it, like, what would you suggest? Like, how could people go about it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm passionate about people remembering their own record, because I know that each one of us, we are cosmic treasure houses, libraries, record keepers. What we hold, each one, is just extraordinary. And I feel it's one of our primal longings and joys to actually access that. And it has the quality, though, and I'm really keen to say this, of I feel that within the Elven remembrance, that we come home to ourselves and we remember, but there's constantly within the homecoming this energy of an epical quest, like that our forgetfulness also is beautiful and natural. Like we're constantly evolving, infinitely evolving, uncovering. So I think it's fun as well. It's a joy to
Yes.
remember, and it never stops. And I'm so passionate to share that with people, and that's why, I mean, I've created a journey, the people of the sun, people of the stars, to facilitate that remembrance. And it uses those key tools which you can access. So many people are sharing it, but these shamanic tools, and what I love about shamanism, it really looks, and it's an ancient light technology, gifted tens of thousands of years ago. I believe it evolved towards the ending of Lemuria, and it's another of my timeline remembrances, those shamanic lifetimes through the era of density, when we used these ways, the ways of remembering that we are these multidimensional beings, and that the earth is also, and to stay in connection to that, to keep our brainwaves in that kind of rhythm. And
Yeah.
it's a way of doing that safely. You step back and forth across into the record, but come back fully here, bring the information fully. You know where you are, you always know where you are. And it's a beautiful way to begin building this body of interdimensional remembrance in a way that's profoundly grounded. Because as we remember, it can also bring up grief, because we remember the place where we belong, and it can make it feel a little bit harder to be here at first. But I think if we do it in this beautiful, grounded way, step by step, what we can realize is that we are bringing home here. You know,
Yeah.
that's the nature of Earth. She invites us to bring home here and to fully co-create that with her. So I love that shamanism helps us to make that bridge. And what I would say, I guess, to each one is, in that remembering, is to really follow, it's the inner child, that curiosity also, which might feel very childlike, but it's the, you know, what you feel drawn to, whether it's the fairies, the fae, the dragons, a star system. Let that curiosity and that light current unfold within you. And I think if you use some kind of grounded tool, and I think shamanism is amazing, but again, you have to honor your heart so much for accessing, knowing you can just go deeper and deeper into that remembering and
Yeah.
start letting it flow through, bring you, because it'll guide your life here. It wants to pattern your existence. It wants to bring you the most beautiful, fulfilling existence. And as those cosmical patterns come through, they give us lives here, like really real lives, like, you know, just in
Yes.
all the small ways, like, you know, even expressing yourself, wearing the clothes you'd love to wear, you know, like living in the home you'd love to live in, being with the person you truly love, doing the work you love. All of these things, these cosmical patterns of our deep timeline, repattern and recode these beautiful lives that we are here to live. So that connection and that bridge, and I really share that, you know, going from a place, beginning to build the energy of your home sanctuary here. And one of the amazing tools I came across at the beginning with shamanism was that there is a place you can see as, it's not about journeying out really far into the other dimensions. It's a kind of imaginal realm, a sanctuary that you start building in your awareness here, like a magical garden, your sacred place that is where you journey from in consciousness. It holds your portals to those far realms. You know, it's the stars, the inner earth, wherever it
Yes.
is that you travel from. And I always found that the most amazing key. I still go to that place and my spirit guides meet me there. And yeah.
And yeah, and it's so funny. That's exactly how it started for me as well. It's just like
Is
that's
it?
the safe spot,
Yeah.
and from there you travel and you keep
Yeah.
coming back to it.
Yes. It's so, so powerful, so beautiful, so simple.
And I really appreciate what you're saying about the groundedness and like the earth connection and stuff, because one thing that scares me a little bit about like being in this work is that people want to go away, they want to go back, they just want to be
Yeah.
there, but we keep forgetting that we need to be here. We
Yes.
are choosing to be here. We are here. This is what we're doing. We want
Yes.
to be here. And so it's so good, like from a teacher perspective, like you, like just bringing that to the forefront, because I think that's one of the messages like that I am so keen on. It's just like this
Yeah.
needs to be a grounded experience. Like you say, you stand
Yes.
with both feet in both worlds, but you keep returning to the fact that you are human and you're having this experience. So I really appreciate
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. And the Elven, the 11th teaching of the Deerskin book was, you know, your ordinary life is the place that shows the true level of your spiritual involvement. We cannot measure where we are by our furthest out experiences. It's what is this ground reflecting? And I know that might sound hard, but it's actually a beautiful invitation because all of that energy gets to transmute what's here. And the densities we've experienced here, you know, what I think is so challenging is witnessing the cruelty, the malevolence, the profound destruction of life, the lack of care that we witness here, and the ways too within each timeline that we may have felt intimidated, overwhelmed, powerless, victimized, profoundly, deeply wounded and hurt. And what's most dangerous at the heart of that imprint is where we have come to believe that that darkness, to put it simply, though I don't adhere to a, you know, sort of but just of simplicity's sake,
Yeah.
in a non-dualistic sense, where we see that most disconnected energy of separation, where it's touched us, we've actually gone into a place where we have given away our power and light at some point on our timeline and believed that that was more powerful than the love and the light within us. And we go back to those places, and when we discover them, and in the Elven teachings, it's the spirit of the deer who fearlessly, through her gentleness, she gazes into the heart of those most painful places, knowing that in fact that wasn't true. Love is more powerful. And that instead of those moments where our soul shrank and disappeared and gave away its power, we can now make a different gesture. We begin to spiral back. We come in. We come in. We don't disappear. We call back those parts. And that's what's amazing in the shamanic lineage too, is the soul retrieval. That there are parts of us through all of the trauma we've experienced that have traveled out. Like you say, they've gone, they left. And they're still waiting in those dimensions, waiting to be summoned back. And that we call them back to come back, say, we need you here now. You need all of this power and this light and this energy here to come back. And there is nothing more powerful than the light. There is nothing more powerful than love. Absolutely nothing. And calling them back now with this deep awareness, this knowledge that we have at this point on our timeline, welcoming them back. And as they come back in the ground of our lives here then, when those moments come that make us want to spiral out, like we feel challenged, we don't want to be here. It feels like these realities of malevolence, of cruelty, of lack of care, separation are more powerful. It's an amazing experience, yes, to feel frightened. I have them still, moments where I can feel that, and I can feel that doubt in my body. I say, can I? Is it? And then actually taking a breath, standing more deeply present, and through that return just saying, I'm here, love is more powerful. And through that breaking through the veils, letting the reality alter here on our ground. And in those crystalline moments, our lives start to get really magic. And all of that magic that's been out there starts happening here. I think we win back our power in our lives here. We get that groundedness you're speaking of in those little conquests, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
gods. Yeah.
It's so gorgeous. Oh my God. I can literally speak to you all day long. And I'm just like, so, okay. So let's quickly, like, when I'm just like in this space, I'm just like, my whole brain's all over the show. And I'm like, I
Yeah.
need to ask you more questions. If people want to work with you, if they want to check out your work, how can they connect with you? How can they, like, where are you? Like, tell us
Sure.
where you.
Yeah. Well, my calling's been to create an Elven portal. It's like to have it standing, I say, come back to Avalon. So I live in Avalon in Glastonbury, UK, but all my work's online at the moment, as with so
Yeah.
many of us. Really called to that. And so to hold the golden Elven heart in Avalon. And the portal is online, so Elen Elenna is, my site, but it is that energetic portal, into the remembrance. And yeah, to hold an online membership, which is monthly, like that synchronizes you in your process of remembrance, of return, of this movement into your own vast record in alignment with the lunar cycles. I so believe in a natural and a graceful ascension process, not to be in the drama of ascension, like, the next
Yes.
solar wave, the next solar flash, whatever, like, this is all, now I'm purging, now I think, I mean, I experienced that too. I think it's part of our ascension and our remembering,
Yes.
but in the people of the sun, the people of the stars, part of the dream of that is to synchronize with the beauty way of ascension.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a ceremony. It's utterly beautiful, and so that is synchronized with the cycles of the moon, and to be gentle, continuous, this incredible blossoming, and also through that, I hold a program. It's really helping people who are called to write their record, like to fast track them through what took me 10 years to remember. How do we write this record of what we hold in its true form into this world, holding its true frequency? So yeah, I've got what I call the Elven supernova program for those, because like a supernova is like an ancient star that's ready to gift its light. It sort of implodes and gifts its radiance and supernova presence. So yeah, those who are ready to share their record, their golden book of starlight. So that's really, the portal is there, Elen Elenna, and there's a podcast I started, like yours, which I am
Yes.
going to continue, but it's only got a few on it. So that's been a little stop-start, but a blog as well. And I write, continuously and share the
Yeah.
Elven Ascension updates, what's happening right now, through that timeline of Elven remembrance.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I will also be posting like the URL for the website. Everything will be there. So if you want to go and check it out, please do. I mean, just from this conversation, my head's like a little bit blown open. So it's so amazing.
Well,
I'm
thanks for
really
listening,
grateful.
Yolandi. I did talk a lot.
I'm absolutely grateful. This was so beautiful. So yeah, I think we have like run out of time now because I only get allotted so much time on my show. But yeah, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm just so grateful. And I just this feels to me like there's like massive doors opening for people and for myself just by having this conversation. So I thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you, Yolanda. The space and you are utterly beautiful. I know that what can only be spoken is what can be heard. And so our field of listening, the field of that which you are, is just the most incredible amplification to receive as well. I really feel that.
Darling, I really appreciate it. Okay, so I just want to thank you all for listening, and please, please, please just go check out this work. It is incredible. Thank you so much.